Welcome to Pain in the Arts, the podcast where the pursuit of meaningful art meets the unpredictable demands of real life. I am Lyndon.
And I am Brea.
And boy, do we have an episode for you today. It was good catching up with friends of ours that we hadn't seen for a bit yesterday.
It was.
So that was always good for the soul.
Definitely. It felt a bit cheeky, like as a school day. And there we were, all four of us, not at school or at work.
Yeah.
So that was quite nice. It felt a bit indulgent and, yeah, really great to see them.
It's nice to do something different, break a routine, get out of the house, into somebody else's house. Yeah, but just to chat and catch up and
yes,
hear about, everything that's happening there. Well, it was really good.
It was. Now, you've been friends with Chris since you're in primary school.
Since primary school, yeah.
So it's a decent friendship.
I know, it didn't start out as friends. He used to brand me with a tennis ball. Like repeatedly. That's the one. It may have happened once, but in my mind it happened, there was a good stint of it happening. I was seeing everything from his perspective is good fun. And I think
It sounds a little
I soon
like
learned it
bullying.
wasn't too malicious. Maybe I had to harden up a bit. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But we had enough things in common that, yeah, we soon became friends.
Mm.
But yeah, I just thought the rules of brandy was once someone hit you with the tennis ball as hard as they can, that's it. You're it. I didn't think that when the tennis ball ricocheted back to them that they're allowed to pick it up again and throw it at you again, like as many times as they.
Yeah, I don't think that was the rule. I think that was just someone having a little fun at your expense.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, shout out
What
to
a piece of work.
Yeah, well,
But,
hi to Chris and to the beautiful Cell. If you guys ever get to listen, Chris didn't seem too enthralled, but we'll see.
No, he's always keen to find out what we're up to and over the years what I'm up to, and then he kind of just shakes his head at disbelief because, I'm talking about something that doesn't sound like it's going to make any money, and he wonders what I'm doing, and then I start to wonder what I'm doing and start to question my own intelligence, and I think he gets great joy out of that.
He does. Well, we put it to him that he ought to be a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a great idea.
Oh,
It occurred to me that we could get him on as the voice of reason. But I just think, I don't know, I just have to be prepared to
pick up the pieces of your ego after he leaves.
Yeah. But I think it would be fun. It's always fun. So Chris has become a deer hunter, like a couple of years ago, or a year ago. We have a lot of wild deer that get culled every year, and I think you get one or two deer, and if you're eating the meat, that'll do your family for a year, which is lucky for Chris because he's only shot one. So I thought if we ever do get him on the show, we'll call him the deer hunter.
Okay.
Yeah. His average is one a year.
1 a year.
And he's got 1 month
Well,
to meet that average for this year.
The deer hunter, not necessarily the deer colour.
Yeah, so when we were having our brunch, which turned into lunch yesterday, and so Chris was asking about, I think he was asking about the studio and how the studio was going, and I was telling him about just how I wanted to choose my clients and be a bit selective, that I'm working on my own stuff, and he was quizzing me on that. And I said something like that I'd come to accept that maybe I am a perfectionist. And then Sal just burst out laughing. She said, what did she go? Maybe. Or like,
So my point stands from
was funny.
several episodes ago.
Well, there's a few episodes when we
Yeah.
were talking about it, and I was sort of dodging and weaving around it. You know,
You've
when you
always
sort of
been a
know, but
perfectionist.
hey,
Knowing that you've always been a perfectionist. And
yeah. Well, this is the thing. Like when we're talking about stuff now, it's like sometimes it's the first time words have been uttered into the room, and so I'm dealing with things in real time as we're talking about them. Sometimes this is the only chance we get to talk as well.
it is.
It's like date night during the day,
Yep.
seeing as we don't tend to have date nights. We've tried.
We have tried. But
So-
now we have a Thursday pod appointment. Has to
Yeah.
double as our date time.
So, yes, I was going to say that's, what I learned is that, I have to own it,
Yeah.
claim it. I'm a perfectionist, and that's fine. It was just funny. It was just funny yesterday.
It's funny to
How I
have
sort of was.
other people's points of view on you when your
I
own
guess that's part-
perspective of yourself is a little different to the way other people
I guess
see
that's
you.
one of the things too, just catching up with people that you've known for a long time. And like you said, I've known Chris for a long time, and it allows insight into someone that other people wouldn't have. And even if they've got it, they're not allowed to voice it because they haven't earned that. They haven't earned that.
That's right.
That privilege, I suppose. And the other thing with old friends is you can say stuff and you know where it's coming from. You know, you meet people, even with friendships you have along the way that aren't as long lasting. Sometimes someone will, even in that friendship, will say something and you're like, they're just saying it to bring me down a peg
Yeah.
or to build themselves up in front of other people to make them look a little bit better, even though they're your friends. And you're like, what's going on here? You don't get that with friends you've had for a long time.
No.
And it's not to do with the time, it's not to do with the length of time you've been friends. It's to do with the fact that that's somebody you've decided to continue a friendship with.
Exactly, because they didn't never do that to you. They
don't do that.
Yep.
Yeah. And we have a saying, and you know what? I think we might have got this from Chris and Sal, of good friends being low maintenance.
Yeah.
You know? Well,
True. It's a good way to put it.
yeah.
Because I know with several of my other friends, we'll often comment, oh, gee, it's been 6 months since I talked to you or whatever, but it feels like no time has passed at all. And it's like that you just pick up exactly where you leave off. And, if life gets a bit too lifey and starts doing weird things and you can't be in contact with people for a while, then, it's understood that that's just what's happening, that it's not an indication on the friendship or on how much you care about that friend. It's just about what you've got going on at the time. So, yeah.
It looks like you've got important documents there. That seems a bit studious of you. What have you been working on? Or is that for something else?
No, it's for this podcast. It is the episode I'd like to bring today. Now, this has been a bit of a promised episode actually, because I think it's time to talk about our family and our background, because
okay.
it's a heavier one.
Why have we promised that? When did we promise this?
We've said it in a couple of episodes, like, we'll tell you more about Birdie, we'll tell you more about this down the track.
Did we not do some of that last week? Last week's was a bit of an accidental, emotional.
It was a little bit, and that's why I felt like we should just get into some of the facts about, our family, so that people have got the background, so it's not a bit of a mystery, I suppose. So, yeah, just thought it's time. Let's get it done with. It's hard to talk about sometimes, so that's probably why we haven't.
Well, we don't have very long to talk about it. This will have to be like a 3 or 4-parter.
Well, hopefully not. I just wanted to give a bit of the background. So make me wrap it up if it's getting too long in certain parts. Those who have joined certain tiers in our Patreon will know that we actually have a couple of additional podcasts that we are putting out alongside Pain in the Arts. One of them is called In Search of Home, and that's a journey alongside me as I breathe new life into a novel that I had begun, but I'd had to put aside for a while. And the novel is fictional, but the two protagonists, Tom and Audrey, are loosely based on our children. Audrey's inspired by Birdie and Tom is inspired by our other children. So
We have 8 kids.
our 3 other children. So what is it about our children that's so extraordinary?
So we have 4 kids. Let's just
4
state
altogether.
that. We don't have 8.
No, we don't. We have 4. So let me just talk about our kids for a bit. Our firstborn, and we are not using their names. We're just going to use different code names or whatever for them just to protect their privacy. So our firstborn is 21. Now she is a trans woman and she's also our first one to leave the nest. So she moved out this year, which was a bit of an adjustment for us all. And obviously as her mother, I bravely said, wish you the best and you're going to be amazing. It's going to be excellent. And then I went into my room and sobbed my heart out because it's very hard to have your little one leave, even though she's no longer so little. Now, as a trans woman, we will use her chosen pronouns of she, her when we refer to her, even though growing up for most of her life, she went by he, him pronouns, but we respect her choices with that. Our second-born has just turned 19. He is our son who is an apprentice electrician at the moment. He finished school last year and he's had a really good idea of what he wants to do. So he's moved into employment. He's enjoying driving his car and doing it up and going camping and things like that. And he still lives at home. Our third-born is also our son who is 17 and he is in the last year of high school at the moment. You might hear us talk about his music. He's a drummer, so that's what he spends a lot of time doing. And then our youngest is Birdie, and the reason that we're calling her Birdie for the purposes of this podcast rather than fourth-born is because I've used Birdie as a pseudonym for her in some previous articles and literature and so on that I've written. She does tend to crop up as a theme a lot in my writing, and so that's just the alternative name that I've given to her. Now she's 12 years old at the moment.
So that's it.
That's it.
End of the show.
Unfortunately
End of the episode.
not. Unfortunately not. And the reason that there's I guess a lot to talk about our kids is because Birdie's health and her medical history is so complicated and has had such a huge impact on our home and our family. So I wanted to just give a bit of a wrap up from when she was young or, a baby. So jump in, Lyndon, when you think of things I've left out or, and I want to try not to be too long during this, I guess. So we noticed quite early on that Birdie wasn't developing at the same rate that her siblings had. The first year of life is the year that humans change and develop the most rapidly. Like it just happens in the blink of an eye. When you're raising kids, you want to hold on to all those beautiful moments as babies. And they really do go from needing full support, to doing anything, moving their limbs and everything, through to rolling, sitting, crawling, and sometimes even walking or getting ready to walk by their first birthday. Birdie, by her first birthday, was still lying on her back and she couldn't stand or sit or roll or crawl. So it was really quite a significant delay that she had, developmental delay. So we knew by the time she was about 4 months old that things weren't developing as expected. And we began looking for answers and interventions. I started doing daily physio with her. We went through some screening and testing, getting things tested at that time, which we had to wait a long time to get results for. By 19 months of age, we'd started to teach Birdie to sit and also to bum shuffle. So she really couldn't hold herself up on her arms in order to crawl. Her arms were really very frail and weak. So because she was sort of showing some signs with sitting, we were able to teach her to sort of shuffle along on her bottom and use her hands to kind of push herself along. So she shuffled along on her butt for quite a long time, actually, until she was 2.5, nearly 3 years old. In fact, she had a little bangle that she used to wear and it would go tink, 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 tink along the floor as she would shuffle. So we actually called her Tink for quite a while, was her nickname. So, yeah, she learned to do that, and it really was a lot of time that we spent helping her to develop her core strength so that she could sit better, and with the hope that she would be able to stand and walk. We implemented a walking frame to help her learn the mechanics of walking to start to get that happening. And when she was around 20 months of age, we received the results of her microarray genetics test, and it informed us that she had a condition called Phelan-McDermid Syndrome, or 22q13. And she had actually a very large 8 megabases deletion of her 22nd chromosome.
It's all very scientific.
It is a bit, and there's a little bit more science, so stick with me.
Okay.
Look, the simple genetics, and I mean, I'm no geneticist, obviously, and I've had to struggle with the science for a while. But
we're not doctors, let's make that clear.
Yeah, to avoid any confusion that may arise. We each have 2 copies of each chromosome. You know, something that we did learn along the way was that most people will not have perfect genes. There's often genetic material missing or mutated or impaired or even translocated, which means that it's swapped spots with some other genetic material along the way. And often we don't notice any of these changes to our genetics. They don't often have any effects that we can see. In a lot of cases with a deletion, there might be no effects because some genes only need 1 copy of them to be effective, and you have 2 copies of each gene. With the 22q13 deletion, Birdie, as I said, she's missing 8 megabases, which means actually 8 million pieces of genetic material, which sounds like a lot, but if you were to look at her genetic microarray, it's like the end of the Q arm of the 22nd chromosome. So one side of one arm of one chromosome. So it doesn't look like a lot, but it certainly affects a lot of things. The reason that it's 22q13 is that 13 is the position of a gene called SHANK3, which is a very important gene, and it's one of the main culprits of the symptoms of this syndrome. So what are the symptoms? Phelan-McDermid Syndrome is a rare genetic disorder. It's not very common at all, and it affects how a person's brain develops and functions, how their body functions. It results in intellectual and physical disabilities that do vary from person to person, so no 2 people with Phelan-McDermid are the same. Some people lose essential skills, and most will require long-term care and medical attention. Common symptoms are low or weak muscle tone, developmental delays, absent or delayed speech. And some symptoms can include moderate to severe intellectual disabilities, speech delays or problems, or absence, low or weak muscle tone, sleep disturbance, poor feeding, difficulties with toilet training and chronic constipation, seizures, behavioural challenges, decreased perspiration and heat intolerance, and lymphedema.
Well, that's all a bit unfair because you've spent way more time talking about her than the other kids.
I know I have. And this is the thing. It's like, this is what we found with our family, is that having a rare syndrome in the mix meant that so much of the attention had to go towards that and to, trying to help with the symptoms of that. So, yeah, it does get unfair, and we have acknowledged that to our other kids. It's not fair on anyone, is it? It sucks for Birdie. Horrendous condition. Obviously, the amazing kids that we know now through the Phelan-McDermid Foundation, they struggle with a lot, and they're just the most wonderful kids and incredible families that, it's just such a privilege to know. But yeah, you wouldn't wish this syndrome on anyone.
Well, you only know them through there's been a couple of conferences we've been to.
Yep.
And the rest of the relationships is basically just through Facebook.
Yeah, it's all online. Yep.
Because it's not like, at her school, there'd be no one else with Phelan-McDermid Syndrome.
Not that I know of, no. So, yeah. And she's at
a special school.
Yep.
And there's not one other Phelan-McDermid Syndrome kid there.
No.
And
so
there's, hundreds and hundreds of students.
Yeah.
So there's no families to connect with in our immediate location. There are a few in Melbourne, but yeah.
Yeah. We don't see them very, very often because people are going through all different things at all different times as well.
Because the kids require so much care. And so like for us, when she's here, it's it's not even minute by minute. It's like, you leave her for 5 seconds and
your TV's busted.
TV's busted or
it's just so
anything,
constant. Yeah.
You literally turn around and she's not in the room and you go, hang on.
Trouble. For Birdie particularly, the symptoms of Phelan-McDermid that she specifically suffers from intellectual disability, and so it's never quite equivalent, but to give you an idea, she's 12 years old and her sort of intellectual capacity is that of a sort of 18-month-old to 2-year-old child at this point. She's non-speaking mostly. She does make some noises and has a few words, which is really nice to hear her voice. She has reduced mobility due to the low muscle tone and certainly sort of reduced coordination, so she's not moving equivalent to her peers.
Although she can throw a ball fairly accurately.
She's always had a dead arm throw. Like, how amazing. It's just like something
She'd
she's
really
always
good at
had.
netball. She's got a very good netball pass.
She has. I'm actually looking into basketball for her at the moment. We shall see. She has sleep disturbances, so most nights she wakes several times a night, requiring care.
This list feels too long.
She's got
You don't have to
some
go through it
feeding
all.
difficulties, toileting challenges, many behavioural challenges. She has autism, she has ADHD, and just to top it all off, she has some neuropsychiatric symptoms, which I actually will touch on soon. But I wanted to talk about how our family life changed once this diagnosis came about, because it really was quite earth-shattering for us. Obviously, there was the emotional, like such a blow to kind of think, oh, our child who we love so much is going to have these struggles, and how do we help her, and what does it mean, and what will life look like? Just really tough. But we went from having, a fourth child who we thought was just going to fit into the established family routines and our values and so on, and we sort of had to really pivot, and a lot of the focus and attention went on Birdie and her needs. For many years we received little to no assistance, so it was just down to us to manage all of the unknowns of this rare syndrome. And early on, the challenges were to help her develop as much as possible. For instance, I spent a number of months teaching her how to fall properly, which might sound counterintuitive, but she didn't have any fall or save reflexes. So, for instance, if she fell over, like if she just lost her footing or her legs kind of locked up, she would just fall face forward and not put her hands out to save herself. So I had to spend a lot of time with her on soft grass and so on, guiding her to put her hands out as she went down so that she would develop that reflex. So there was just so many micro steps in teaching her how to, function. We spent a long time trying to work out what communication would look like for her and how much did she understand and what tools would work best to aid her. And then over time, her behavioural challenges became the most significant to manage day to day. So how do you teach a child to behave in ways that fit in with the family and with the society around them when they don't have an understanding of some of the basic building blocks? For instance, Birdie didn't recognise that other people have feelings and needs as well. She could only really see the world as it revolved around her. So
I know other people like that.
yeah, it was sort of like it's like that, but it's extreme.
Hey,
it's extreme though. For instance, if I was talking to one of the other children, she would see that as almost a failure on her part to keep the attention on herself. So she would, scream or throw something and do everything she could, ramp up those efforts to get the attention back on herself because that's what she thought it needed to be for her survival, I suppose. So very disruptive to family life and 3 other growing children as well. And with ADHD as well and autism, it just means that she's on the go all the time. She doesn't have a very large attention span, so she gets bored within moments, but also craves routine and familiarity.
With a license to be bored at any given time.
Yeah, so she demands new stimulation, but also that it needs to be sort of familiar and structured in the way that she likes it. It's really such a tricky balance all the time, and it is moment by moment.
It's an impossible balance.
It is. It's a moving target all the time.
So it's not balance at all, is it?
No, it's a flow
It's
that
imbalance.
it's very hard to get right. And she moves a lot. She doesn't like to sit and do things. So I, for many years, didn't sit down unless she was actually sleeping.
She's got busy hands.
Busy hands.
We know that.
Wants to get out. She doesn't like being locked in small spaces. Like, not that we're locking her in, but like as in if she goes into a room and someone shuts the door, she sees that as that she doesn't have access to outside. So she gets very distressed very quickly.
Do you remember sitting at school on those any school desk, I guess, and you just stick your hand underneath it and you start fiddling and you're like, ooh,
No,
and you discover all kinds of, but like you can't help, but you sort of know there's probably something gross under there, but you can't help but fiddle.
I could definitely help but fiddle.
Right,
I would
yeah, I
not
guess so.
want to touch.
As soon as her hand touches something, she just has to fiddle and
she can't not. I know.
Yeah. So even like outside the other day when I thought she was just retrieving a ball or something, as she walked back to me, she ran her hand along the top of my favourite chair, Chairs Millionaire, which is like a wicker chair. And one of the strands of wicker has been repaired with tape, but it's come apart. And so her fingers caught it, and then immediately she just starts pulling at it. And,
she can't help but wreck it.
Don't touch it.
Yeah.
It's my favourite chair.
No, it's
got to fix it.
Compulsion in her to do that sort of thing. Yeah. Birdie has sensory issues as well. So, for instance, screams when we brush her hair and things like that. And she,
this is why you've got so many pages. The list is endless.
And look, why are we going into this? A few reasons. One, because we've referred to it a number of times, that we have sort of life circumstances that have made our creative pursuits difficult to get around to sometimes. Another reason is, as I said, Birdie is the inspiration behind Audrey, one of my characters, and a lot of what Audrey experiences comes from Birdie. Another reason is because I definitely feel an obligation to raise awareness of Phelan-McDermid Syndrome and the difficulties that so many people who live with this syndrome go through and what their families have to do just in order to help them thrive and have the best lives they can. We are certainly we're a minority and we're often unseen and forgotten about and ignored and very, very isolated. So I think it's important to bring some of these things to light, and none of it is to degrade or to put down. And it's certainly something I've struggled with, is kind of the balance between Birdie's privacy and to balance that out with showing that this is what her life is like. This is how this syndrome impacts her. These are the things that moment by moment she has to deal with. And as a society, we shouldn't turn away from it or ignore it or pretend it's not happening or allow ourselves to just swan about in the ignorance that there's people living with these kind of conditions very close to us and they need help and their families need support. So it's really important, I think, for people to know it. And I know our podcast, it's about the arts and it's about, inspiring ourselves to continue to create something great. But, here's us two people that are trying to do that. But this is the challenges that we live with every day to support our daughter. And we're not the only ones. Like, there's people out all over the place trying to do the same thing.
I'd still like to just go back and talk about Chris's deer hunting skills.
It is more comfortable. We've actually put this episode off for a bit because it's hard to talk about. It's hard to know. It's hard to, when we're not with Birdie, we actually want to switch off a bit as well, because it isn't great news. It is. It's tough.
When we were young parents, not that long ago, when we were young parents, and we were quite determined to not. We didn't want to be parents who are always just talking about our kids. We wanted to be, able to have the same sort of adult conversations and dinner party conversations, if you like, that we were having before we had kids. And we just didn't want to be like that. But then once Birdie comes along, it's all consuming.
Yeah.
And
it just turned everything on its head. Like all of our previous parenting knowledge didn't apply even.
Something too I just was thinking about bringing awareness, not just to this particular condition, but I guess that's the one that we know, but just that there are people that are, for all kinds of different reasons, part of minority groups, which we've found ourselves in one. So we didn't choose to be part of this, and having to sort of meet other people with kids with the same condition. It's like, I didn't choose to be part of this. I don't really want to be in this club. Yeah, the advocacy is a challenge because you don't feel like it. Like, it's just you're using up so much energy just to get through a day that to even bring awareness to something takes a lot of extra energy that
you may not have.
that you don't have. And we know people that do a lot of advocacy.
There's some
and
incredible
it's just incredible.
people.
And there are also people that they've been that way their whole life, like just in terms of their community involvement and their generosity. And it's just, just incredible the way some people operate. But do you remember we were talking yesterday with Chris and Sal, and we were asking them about, like, because where they live now, they've found, they've got great neighbours, good community just in their street.
Yeah.
And how they chose where they live. They thought that they'd probably have a good chance of creating community. And I think Chris is way more outgoing than me as well. Like, he'd talk to anyone, whereas I kind of am a bit more reserved, keep to myself a bit more. But I did ask them what was the difference between where they live now and where they used to live. They had some great neighbours, but overall the street didn't have that same community vibe at all. And so I was just asking, why is that? And Sal said, well, a lot of people that lived in that street, it was like lower socioeconomic, and they had a lot of things that they were dealing with. And so they just weren't going to be vocal about it. They weren't really that inclined to be out and communing with other people because they had a lot of stuff going on. And so that's like another minority group that just haven't got the energy to stand up for themselves in that sense. They're just surviving and getting
That's right.
Getting by.
It can be so complex if you've got a lot going on, maybe with health or with your social circumstances or whatever. It's not something you want to bring up in small talk, and yet it's something that consumes your headspace and your energy and, determines what you're going to be doing with your day. It can really be all encompassing. And I mean, I know we have at certain times of Birdie's development just found that it's been so all consuming that we have like pulled away from our communities and our friends and, people we'd often see, because you don't want to answer questions, or you just, it's too painful to talk about, and yet you can't talk about anything else. You got nothing else to say. And it's just difficult to even be around people. So we've certainly gone through times when we've really drawn in.
Yeah, but it also feels a bit mutually exclusive. Is that right? Like it's not all our doing. It's not all on us. Like you definitely feel it the other way as well.
Yeah, true. We're not the easiest people to be around, and people don't know what to say or do. So I think people do find that as well when they have difficult circumstances, that they can lose friends, I suppose, quite easily.
Yeah, well, you're sort of your, for want of a better word, your network that you're used to existing in, it shrinks. It shrinks dramatically and quite quickly as well, and you lose touch pretty quickly.
But then, as I was saying, on the other side, your world opens up to a very specific community that do understand what you're going through, and really we have met the most amazing people through those networks. So
it's funny, but I'd rather we didn't.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's I mean, it's kind of the price you pay to be able to meet those people is that you have to have this horrible thing going on in your daughter. It's not good.
At one of the
pay that
conferences,
price.
There was a father of a child with Phelan-McDermid Syndrome, and his child was she was in her 30s, I think, and for 20 years they didn't even know what her condition was because it hadn't been discovered yet.
Yeah.
But he was just saying to all the blokes, he said, listen, whatever your plan A was for your life, forget about it.
Yeah.
Whatever your plan A is, forget about it, you know.
Yeah.
And
well, it is that life-changing to have a child with this syndrome.
And for completely other reasons, actually, when I was thinking about a discussion that we might have on the podcast, it was actually about plan A's and not having a plan B.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I flung myself into the world after school. I just didn't believe in plan B. So I thought I'm just going to have plan A, because if you have a fallback, you'll never know whether your plan A would have worked. Surely you just got to go with plan A. And so that's what I did. And over the years, that's challenging in all different ways on its own. But then to have someone tell you, oh, forget about plan A.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I hear ya. It's a bit like that. It's a bit like the discussion on perfectionism. I hear what you're saying. I can see what you're saying, but I reckon maybe it's something else. Maybe everyone else is wrong. Maybe it's perfectionism, but it's not exactly what you think it is or how it is. And so, yeah, it was a bit like that with plan A, kind of going, yeah, I know he's right. However, remember when we first had kids and you get all the people that go, oh, your life will never be the same. We're like, well, we're going to give it a good crack and see whether we can stick a baby in a canoe. Yeah. It's like after a while you go, well, we can, but gee, that was a bit difficult.
That's tricky. All right, I wanted to wrap up a few bits and pieces about.
Thank goodness. This
No,
is
not wrap up.
This is science and
wrap up.
down vibing.
Well, I'm sorry if you feel that it's down vibing. It's just the reality of what our daughter lives with every day. And as I said, I think it's worth explaining, because how do people understand otherwise? You know. So Birdie's not motivated by promises of the future or consequences of the future. So her behavioural difficulties can't be solved in the same way that you would parent other children. You can't sort of reward good behaviour or have consequences for bad behaviour. And so instead we've got to very slowly build up preferable and functional behaviour by modelling it to her. We've had to model keyword sign, which is a way for her to communicate. We give attention to preferable behaviour. We've had to teach her that toys and games can be fun, because she didn't have the ability to even play, which seems to be inbuilt in children, but actually it's not. And all the while we've had to manage a lot of difficult behaviours, which include hurting others. So she hurts us, she damages our property, she needs constant and intentional focus, and she also self-harms by pulling her hair and hitting herself. So it's really very difficult.
Bashing her head on things.
Yeah, scratching her face. There's so many things. Look, she's a bit older now. She does have some more understanding about the world around her. She's able to wait a little bit, and her receptive language is a lot stronger than her expressive language. So we've been able to implement some AAC measures. AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So, for instance, she can understand us saying, are you hungry? And she can indicate yes or no. But with her AAC device, which is an iPad with speech generating software, she can find the word for McDonald's, and she can ask us, that she wants to go there. Yeah, she loves that one. And, she can see
car and McDonald's.
And you can even, she's like, it's amazing progress for someone who's had so many struggles. But we can say to her, would you prefer a burger or chicken nuggets? And she can select which one she wants. So the power of that for her is incredible. Like, what a great tool to give her some choice and control in her life. We've also taught her some keyword sign, which is a basic form of Auslan or sign language. Now, Birdie can only retain a few signs at a time, so we had to adapt our approach. At first, we're trying to teach her all the signs for everything. So now we focus on the most useful and important signs. So things like more, finished, and help, you can understand how those particular words would be useful in many, many situations. So they've got a wide use. We also use things like visual schedules, PEX cards, which is a picture exchange system. And we speak to her in ways that are going to help her the most. For instance, not giving her too much information at once or too many choices, asking her too many questions that would require an in-depth answer, sort of more closed-ended questions and so on. And it's taken a long, long time and a lot of effort to teach her. Now, if all this wasn't enough for our darling daughter, she's also unfortunately developed some neuropsychiatric symptoms as part of Phelan-McDermid Syndrome. Some of the kids get these. It's luck of the draw. Some kids really struggle with seizures, for instance, which can be horrendous and absolutely debilitating and wipe them out completely. Some kids have a lot of GI issues, and that can be hugely impactful. So far, Birdie hasn't had either of those, but she has unfortunately gotten neuropsychiatric symptoms, and these can include bipolar disorder, mania, catatonia, and regression, which she has suffered from a number of times as well. Birdie's had 4 major neuropsych episodes. In 2019, she stopped sleeping altogether for 3 weeks. She didn't sleep at all for 3 weeks, which you can imagine how brain scrambling that was. And I just held her, I think, for 3 weeks.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah, well, I remember because I was trying to do my thesis at the time, and it was absolutely derailing. It was horrendous. And she really regressed in a lot of ways during that time. And then once she started sleeping again, she actually never went back to sleeping properly ever again. She's never redeveloped that
Isn't that
skill.
interesting? Because like for, let's say, regular people to have such a life-changing experience, like I'm just thinking of someone going off to war and then they'd come back and that's it. That's changed them forever. It does something to them, not just mentally, but I don't know. It changes their
whole nervous system.
Their nervous system. It changes them perhaps at a cellular level.
Yeah.
You know, you hear they're not the person that they were, or so trauma does that. For her, you don't often see, like, there's not an external thing that's done it. It's just something's just happened inside in her brain.
Yeah,
I imagine,
like a chemical imbalance. Yeah, we don't know what it is.
I don't know.
Well, we do know that part of SHANK3 is that it's the coding for a protein that brings stability to the brain. So it gives the stability for the communication system so that you remember words and you can, you remember what you said last time and you can repeat that, or you can string words together. So she doesn't have that coding for that protein. So that stability breaks down a lot. So she can't remember things and can't have, I guess, linear development of like one layer of understanding and knowledge and, learning, building upon another layer and then continuing to build so that you've got good language development, for instance. So, yeah, it's very tricky. These neuropsych episodes, it really is like her brain sort of, the stability just is rocked from time to time. In 2021, she had a manic episode and we didn't know what this was at the time. Her behaviour just escalated until she was pretty much just in attack mode and trying to attack everyone around her and also self-harming. And it got to the point that it took 3 of us adults to hold her down while we waited for the ambulance to come. And when she went into hospital, she was in there. We had her in for 5 days. She was in hospital and nothing changed. Like she just was attacking and screaming and hitting. So it was so traumatic.
Should also mention
horrendous.
3 adults holding her down. She would have weighed probably 20 kilos,
yeah,
25
she's a
kilos
tiny little
at the
thing.
most.
Tiny
and
girl.
That's how it took, all our strength.
Yeah, just to hold what I
which
think
is incredible.
I was holding her head so she wouldn't slam it. You were holding her arms so she wasn't able to attack.
Someone else was holding her legs.
Yeah, so it was really horribly traumatic. Nothing worked in hospital. They never reached a proper diagnosis of what was going on. And we didn't really know about the possible psychiatric symptoms of Phelan-McDermid at the time. So she ended up with some medication and we got her home and she gradually recovered. The next year, in 2022, she had a major episode of catatonia. Her health plummeted rapidly over several days. When we took her to hospital, she was able to walk in, even though she was already not well at all. But by the next morning, she was unconscious and she had awful dystonia, just cramping her limbs up so that she was like frozen solid and really cramped. No one knew what was happening. But this story has a hero in the form of Dr. Tazy Kohlenberg, who is the world's leading expert in these kind of symptoms of Phelan-McDermid kids. I was able to reach out to her and she just was online straight away and helping us. She was able to guide the medical team to understanding what was probably going on, because all of the theories that they had up to that point were completely different to what was actually happening. And all the treatments that they had begun just didn't work and were never going to work on the catatonia. So, yeah, we were able to finally get the right medication and an understanding of what was happening. And then that sort of took several months to recover from. And then in 2023, she had another major episode of catatonia, and this one wasn't as rapid onset or as dramatic looking. It was a lot slower to develop, but it also was a lot slower to recover. And it pretty much took a year all the way through for her to fully recover from that. And we at least knew what we were looking at and what we were dealing with. So we were able to get whatever medical help we could, although the regression and the rebuilding of skills it takes months. Recovery takes months to regain lost skills. And these are skills such as walking, eating, like daily functioning, any kind of self-care like using the toilet. And, just on that, toilet training a toddler, if anyone's ever done that, it's so hard and you feel like you've just got there and then there's setbacks or whatever. And it's, it's a really difficult time for a parent and a new skill for a toddler. Now, when we first toilet trained Birdie, it took, let me think, about 4 years. So rather than several months, it was 4 years in the making till she was toilet trained during the day, which is a major achievement for her. And then to have all these episodes of regression where she loses that skill completely and then you need to spend months helping her to regain those skills, it can be so heartbreaking to see her go through that. But you really have to flip your brain in terms of how to think about it. Like, it's never about just trying to achieve an outcome anymore. It's really about just helping her day by day to do the best she can that day. So it's a really different mindset. I just wanted to talk quickly about, and I do actually need to go soon, wanted to talk real quickly about priorities, because this is pain in the arts. We're talking about trying to achieve artistic endeavours. During all these years, though, raising and caring for our children's been my major focus, and yours, Lyndon, but it's sort of been my full-time job, I suppose. I was able to slowly do my master's degree in creative writing, publishing and editing during this time. And when Birdie first had her first neuropsychiatric episode and didn't sleep for 3 weeks and suffered that regression, I was in the middle of writing my thesis, as I said, and it made it extremely so difficult to get it done, especially just all the uncertainty about what was happening, my sleep deprivation as well, trying to help her regain her lost skills. I got an extension on my due date thanks to the uni being understanding about what was going on, and I had to dig really deep to get it finished. But I did get my thesis done and I got first class honours for it, which I was really glad about. And this thesis, the reason it was important, it really contains the genesis of the novel that I'm currently working on. The next neuropsychiatric episodes that have happened each year, they've really thrown me. I did graduate with my master's and I launched my business, Words Done Right, and that's where I use my writing skills for people's business needs, like their websites, blogs, newsletters, so on. But I have absolutely let my personal creative writing slide during this time. It's just taken a toll in our mental health as well, and ability to function and keep the household running while Birdie's been going through these things. It's also been a busy time with our other children, supporting them through their final years of school. And where we're at today, look, we're aware that, as we were talking about before, we don't want the challenges to our lives to mean that we never get around to our creative pursuits. But honestly, at times, to me anyway, it's really felt like there's almost no option but to just give up. There's just no room in the day, no room in my brain, and no possible, future for any kind of novel to germinate or to grow into any kind of completed piece. I've really had to sideline things altogether. The kids come first, as they do with most families. We're intentional about our parenting. And, we have the best kids in the world. They're amazing. And they all deserve everything that we can give them in order for them to thrive. And we continue every day to work hard for Birdie, to meet her daily needs, to advocate for her, to prepare the best possible future for her, and also to try to change the world around her in every way we can, so that she and those like her can always have a place and a voice and have the value that they deserve, because they haven't always had that and they still don't always have that. Birdie's the most hardest working, most determined, strongest person I've ever known. My commitment to her is that I'll try to be the mum that she deserves to have. So I work very hard at that. And with our other creative works, we do need to make room for these, because without them we feel like we're not quite living properly, like there's something definitely missing from our makeup when we're not doing these things. And I wouldn't wish any of our other kids to lose such an integral part of themselves if they were in this position. And we wouldn't want our friends or other artists, even people we don't know, to have to close off such an integral part of themselves due to the circumstances that they're in. And I know that it happens for a season, and it has for us, but we don't want it to be forever. And so we hope that we can encourage anyone else who's going through a difficult season where you've had to put things aside for a while. I hope it's not forever, and there is that hope that you can get back to it at some future point. So at the moment, we are able to breathe some new life into our own creativity and make a little bit of room for it. Birdie's health is quite stable at the moment, and we're able to support our other kids with their needs. Our businesses are continuing to grow, and now we want to support one another in our next creative thing. So we do hope that you can join along with us. If you haven't already, go to Patreon. You can join for free, and this gives you access to our community chat, which is where you're able to connect with us and with other members. We would love to know, what project are you working on? What are you wanting to work towards? Is it something that you've just begun? Is it something you've had to sideline for a while but you'd love to recommence? We want to hear about it. We want to cheer you on, because we know that a creative life is better when you do it together. And we really want to have a community where we can encourage one another, even when things get tough.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast. You can support the show on patreon.com and look for Pain in the Arts Life. Or if you want to type in the whole thing, it's patreon.com/Pain in the Arts Life. All one word. You can visit our website, paininthearts.life. No .com. It is .life at the end, paininthearts.life. Read more about us and more about the show there. And we will talk to you again.
See you next time.
See you next week. Bye.